I understand I'm late for this one, but let's get this one done, shall we, for today? So let's talk about languages and standardization. Now, when it comes to people, oftentimes that language they have will be part of their culture. There's no way really to get around this, especially for nationalities that are built around ethnicity. Like, for example, the Poles or many indigenous tribes to many different areas. You will often find that they will have their own language for their own people. But of course, as things get more interconnected, things change and we need ways to communicate. And so when it comes to that communication, having a shared language is critical. Think of it as the go-between between two different groups of people. If I'm let's say English and you're French, well then we need some language to speak between each other. And so maybe we choose German, or we pick one of our languages, French or English, and use that instead. Going across the pond to the United States, where I live, the same is true. If you want to talk to, say, someone from Mexico who only speaks Spanish, well then you're going to have to use Spanish as the go-between, or you're going to have to find a way to teach them another language that you know in order to communicate with them. Sign language, too, is, technically speaking, a language in and of itself, with its own variations depending on the area. I don't know it, sorry to say, but it is still a thing to consider. And so if two people know sign language, let's say American Sign Language specifically, because there are regional differences, then it helps for communication because they can use that instead. Internal standardization for a language is almost always a necessity when it comes to professional communication, and it is very useful as a means for professional communication, even if regional dialects still exist. For example, English. American English and British English have their own distinctions, yes, but they still largely write the same minus a few spelling differences. They are still very close in terms of language, so even though there are regional dialects, even within these groups, for example, go north of London, you're going to find different different dialects rather, for English. Meanwhile, if you go between Appalachia, the Deep South, the Great Lakes, all the way to LA, you're going to find differences in dialects there too. There's still a shared language and a standardization of it that people understand when professionally writing. So if a business in, say, Atlanta, Georgia wishes to communicate with someone in Philadelphia, up in Pennsylvania, sure, someone from Georgia may speak differently than someone from Philly, but they're still going to be able to communicate because they share the same standardized English when it comes to professional communication. And then when it comes to other affairs, having a single standardized language as the lingua franca allows for other languages to exist, with people only having to learn two languages, their own native language and the lingua franca, rather than many. Think of it like a wheel with spokes. The central pillar is the standard language, the lingua franca. All the other languages can attach to it and still preserve themselves without needing to overcomplicate things for those learning them. For example, let's say there's 5 languages that are most popular. I'll use some of the ones that actually are, so we have a good example. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, and let's go with Arabic. Okay, those 5 languages, a lot of people speak them, but not everyone speaks the same, and so you have to go between the 5 as the major languages. Well, here's your problem. If someone wishes to do business internationally, they're either going to need translators for all those different areas if they're a large enough business, or they're going to need someone to learn all 5 languages, which is tough in and of itself. And in particular, this is a problem with people who want to preserve their native languages because, for example, if you have to communicate with a bunch of people of different backgrounds, you're going to need different languages unless there's the lingua franca. So unless you two know a single language to communicate, you're going to have issues, which means oftentimes to avoid a bad situation, learning multiple of these major languages is advised. But that's less time spent learning your own language, and so you're going to remember your own language less and going to default more and more to the others, making it much harder to preserve your local language. So it is best instead to have a single language be a spoke in the wheel, or rather the center of said wheel, which all the other spokes can connect to, rather than having 5 different wheels with their own spokes attached. If everyone relies on one language, then they can learn their own, of course, but still have a way to communicate with others of different backgrounds and origins. It allows for greater efficiency. Of course, it would also reduce the need for interpreters, saving money for many states and businesses conducting foreign investments. States obviously gain benefits for diplomacy with this, but it is important to note that businesses, especially as globalization continues forwards. And so, it's just better for communication to have a single lingua franca. Now, you may be confused why I'm saying lingua franca over and over if you don't know much about languages, but lingua franca basically is the French language, and the reason it's developed as it is with the phrase was because French was the language of the courts for much of the Middle Ages, because the medieval times had a lot of power in the Kingdom of France. Indeed, the English kings actually tried to take over France quite a bit because they recognized that it had a lot of money that they wanted and wealth. And not being England. Honestly, the British kings for most of their history seem to want to do everything but be in England. They tried conquering Scotland, they tried conquering Wales and Ireland, and they tried taking over France. And were arguably more French than they were English. The weirdest things. But regardless, French essentially evolved from the court language to a standard language of diplomacy, meaning the lingua franca for much of Europe was, well, French, hence the term. Nowadays you might think of instead Mandarin or English, but the idea of a single standard language to be used for communication still persists regardless of what it is. I am aware that someone has tried to make a universal language. I don't think it worked, and I doubt it ever will work, but, you know, people have tried weirder and succeeded, so who knows. But the biggest thing here would be ease of communication, which would allow ideas to spread more efficiently, and ethical beliefs. The communication would be facilitated far easier, and so would debate, allowing for effective challenging of things without being basically region locked to whatever group speaks your language. To some extent this has already happened, but expanding it greater would allow for greater understanding. Will understanding solve all conflict? Heck no. But it will still help, because it's a lot easier to prove things wrong or right with words than it is with violence. Not because violence doesn't work, no it does, but rather because violence has a high cost, making it far more difficult to actually start. Because let's face it, the moment things hit the ground, someone's likely bleeding. Most likely both people if someone's fighting back. And that creates a big barrier to entry for anyone unwilling to take it. But peaceful debate, on the other hand, well, that's where a lot of people can enter, and it allows for communication, conversion, and effective establishment of more universal beliefs and the spreading of one's beliefs, for both positive and negative benefits. And that is very useful. We have to remember, when it comes to the global communication that we think of, whether it be interstate diplomacy, business arrangements, charitable efforts, whatever it is, you have to remember, in order to do all that, you need to coordinate between many peoples, many beliefs, and many languages. Naturally, having a standard language that everyone speaks would make everything else far easier, because even if you don't know the people, their culture, or much else, if you can at least understand them, speak their language, then you can communicate your ideas to them, work with them, develop compromises, devise plans, and go forwards with your goals together. The globe is not a peaceful place, nor is it a very friendly one, but having a standard language would definitely help for a lot of reasons. Remember, we want people to be able to communicate. It's how you resolve things efficiently. Well, besides stabbing people and hoping you don't mind the bodies. But I really hope that doesn't become the most reliable option. It's so expensive. And so, the next best thing is a standard language, and people communicating efficiently between each other. Heck, even if it's just in one country. The advantages of a shared language are without question there. Think about how much easier it is if, when going to another place, you're able to effectively communicate with the cashier that you're stopping by, maybe the motel owner that you're gonna rent a room for the night. Or, if it's a business trip, the people you're negotiating the contract with. All of that is beneficial. If you speak the same language, you can communicate with them more efficiently and help them easier. It's just better. That's how it is. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.